Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tamar Tait, and I'm a volunteer assistant attorney general in the Westchester regional office of the New York State Attorney General. And it's good to be with you today. I work closely with Gary Brown, who is the statewide elder abuse coordinator for New York Attorney General Letitia James. Gary and I co-host the Attorney General's Report, which is an hourly radio show that features a variety of matters involving scams and frauds. So what I'm going to do today is walk you through the types of complaints that we typically receive at the AG's office that target senior citizens. And I'm going to describe the scams we've seen, some classic and some with twists. So many of the scams that are reported to our office involve the targeting of older adults. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to actually catch the scammers because they could be anywhere in the world. And that's why the AG's office has prioritized outreach campaigns that raise awareness of what these scams look like, especially through programs like these, to warn people so they won't become victims in the first place. Now, there was a study done in New York State in 2016 that put the amount lost to elder financial fraud in New York State, and that's just New York State, at $1.5 billion per year. And that's a lot of money, but I actually think it's a lowball figure, because it's estimated that only 1 in 44 elderly financial victims actually ever report it. There's a tremendous reluctance to admit. And some of the reasons that people don't come forward to report that they've been victimized are shame, denial, they blame themselves, or if the abuser is a family member, there may be a dependency or loyalty issues, or even fear of retaliation. My colleague, Gary Brown, tells a story about a woman who came up to him after an elder abuse program that he had done. And this woman told him that she'd been victimized by a grandparent scandal, which I'll talk about in greater detail shortly. This woman said that she lost $3,000 to the scam, and she became very emotional, and she thanked Gary with a hug, and she said it was the first time she'd ever told anyone that this had happened to her. And Gary asked why she hadn't told her adult children or any other family members, and she replied that if she told them that she fell for a scam, they would think that she had lost it, and it was time to put her in a nursing home or assisted living and take over her finances. And she told Gary, "I'd rather suffer the loss of the money in silence than risk losing my independence." So imagine, it's really a terrible thing. If your car is stolen or your house is burglarized, you'd routinely call the police, right? But if you're victimized by one of these financial scams, you're reluctant to tell people. Now, scammers follow the headlines, and they operate by trying to trigger an emotional response in the victim, which leaves the victim not thinking clearly, and as a result, more easily manipulated. Greed, fear, love, goodwill, all of these emotions are used by scammers. Even sophisticated, experienced, and hardened consumers can be vulnerable if the scammer pushes those right emotional buttons. And it's got nothing to do with intelligence. And the best example I can offer as proof is Bernie Madoff, who was the biggest con artist in the history of the United States. He stole about $60 billion, but if you look at his victims, you'll see they weren't stupid or unsophisticated people. They were some of the smartest individual and institutional investors in the country. For example, the Wilpon family, who until recently owned the New York Mets baseball team. They were also very successful real estate developers, and they lost millions of dollars in Mr. Madoff's Ponzi scheme. And the reason they did is that he was offering very high guaranteed rates of return where you couldn't get anywhere else. And Madoff pushed that greed button. He got people to react based on their desire to make a lot of money. And most people have some element of greed. Deep down, we all want to be the grand prize winner. We all want to pay the lowest price. We all want the best return on our investment. And scammers will always try to take advantage of that. Now, if it seemed to you that the number of robocalls and scam calls you received at the outset of the pandemic have decreased, you're not alone. We believe that the volume of these calls actually went down around 40% in the first few months of the pandemic, when many of the scammers themselves were on lockdown and they couldn't get to their call centers. But in recent months, we have started to see the volume of these calls pick up again. And I'm going to spend a bit of time right now talking about how these robocall operations work and how you can avoid becoming a victim. So the anatomy of these calls is, first of all, there's going to be something to try to push your emotional buttons. The caller's going to try to seem very trustworthy and believable. And here's the big red flag. They're going to tell you that there's an urgent deadline, and if you don't act immediately, either something really bad is going to happen, or you're going to lose a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for something great to happen to you. So what they try to do is set a deadline, but you have to keep in mind that a legitimate offer that's made today is still going to be around tomorrow. So you need to keep that in mind. And the most common phone scam in the history of our country has been the IRS scam, where the caller says he's an agent of the Internal Revenue Service and that you owe money. And if you don't pay today, you're going to be arrested. Often he tells you, go out and buy gift cards, call back with the serial numbers. And now, when you think about it, there's elements of this call that really don't make sense, because does the IRS call on the phone? No, they correspond by mail. Do they threaten you with same-day arrest if you don't pay? No, they don't. And do they tell you to pay your taxes by gift card? Obviously not. But if you don't know that this call is a scam, you might actually be afraid that you're in trouble with the IRS. And I think deep down, many of us are afraid of getting in trouble with the IRS anyway. So this scam plays on some deep-seated fears. And in recent years, this IRS scam has been replaced with the Social Security scam. Either so many people heard about the IRS scam or had experienced an IRS scam call that it was losing its effectiveness. So now, more often, the caller is going to claim to be with the Social Security Administration, and he'll ask you to provide your Social Security number to confirm that you're the person he's trying to reach. And if you provide your number, he's going to use it to commit identity theft. He may also tell you that there's a fee or a fine that you owe, and if you don't pay, your benefits will be discontinued. So that's become far and away a more common scam than the IRS scam. But the scam that gets me the angriest, because it uses the emotion of love to rip people off, is the grandparent scam. And that scam typically works like this. A senior gets an unexpected call from someone who claims to be their grandchild. The caller then falsely says there's an emergency and asks the grandparent to immediately send money. The caller might say something like, "Grandma, I got arrested for drunk driving. I need bail money fast." Or the caller might claim to have been mugged or that their car is broken down. And the caller will often tell the grandparent not to call the grandchild's parents, because the parents are going to be mad or they'll worry too much. So the caller might also pretend to be an attorney or a bail bondsman, or someone else in law enforcement who's contacting the grandparent on behalf of a grandchild. So how do these scammers know the names of your grandchildren or possibly other relatives? In some cases, they don't. For instance, the scammer might say, "Hi, Grandma," hoping that you'll actually have a grandson. And if you ask, "David, is that you?" the scammer's going to say yes. Sometimes the scammers do know the names of your grandchildren, and they can get that information from a variety of sources. Your grandchildren might be mentioned on social media networking sites like Facebook, or if they've managed to hack into your email contact list is going to contain the names of many of your relatives or friends. So the scammers often call in the middle of the night or early in the morning to take advantage of the fact that the victim might not be alert enough to ask more questions. Victims are often instructed that they may have to mail cash payments or go out and buy prepaid debit or gift cards, and to call back and read the serial number on the cards. And during the pandemic, we saw a twist on this. Since scammers were aware that many people weren't leaving their homes to go to stores and therefore wouldn't be able to buy gift cards, scammers were demanding cash payments, which they would actually pick up in person at the victim's home. So when we warn grandparents not to fall for this scam, grandparents are sometimes worried about how they can tell if a grandchild is in real trouble. And here's some tips you can keep in mind. First of all, take a pause. Scammers create a sense of urgency to prey on victims' emotions and also for their love of family members. You should ask a question that only the real grandchild would know the answer to, like, what was the name of your first pet? It's also useful if families develop a secret code or a password that can be used to verify the identity of family members over the phone. And then finally, you should verify any supposed emergency by calling friends and family before you send money. This is especially important if the potential victim has been warned not to do so. So the complaint that we've probably seen the most of during this past year at the Attorney General's office is the fake unemployment claim. So whether you're employed or not, this can happen to you. Imposters are filing claims for unemployment benefits using the names and numbers of personal information of people who haven't actually filed claims. It doesn't matter whether you're employed or not, the scammers are simply using your name. So you're asking, how do I find out if someone has done this? People learn about the fraud when they get a notice from their state unemployment benefits office, or if they are employed from their employer about their supposed application for benefits. If that happens to you, it means that someone is misusing your personal information, including your social security number and date of birth, and you need to act fast. Here's what you can do to protect your finances and your credit. First of all, if you happen to be employed, you should report the fraud to your employer and keep a record of who you spoke with and when. But everyone, employed or not, should report the fraud to the state unemployment benefits agency. And then after that, there's a website. It's called identitytheft.gov. So you should visit identitytheft.gov to report the fraud to the Federal Trade Commission and get help with the next important recovery steps. And those steps are, you can put a free one-year fraud alert on your credit, get your free credit reports, and you can close any fraudulent accounts that have been opened in your name. And that website, identitytheft.gov, will also help you get a free extended fraud alert or a credit freeze to your credit report. and that's going to make it more difficult for an identity thief to open new accounts in your name. And then finally, you should review your credit reports often. For the next year, you can check your reports every week for free, and that's through annualcreditreport.com. And that website can help you spot any new fraud very quickly. And one other thing, the unemployment payments usually are deposited to accounts that the imposters control. But sometimes payments get sent to the real person's account instead. And if that happens to you, the imposters might call, they might text, they might try to reach you by email to try to get you to send some or all of the money to them. They might pretend to be your state unemployment agency, and they might say the money was sent by mistake. And this is what is called a money mule scam. And participating in one could actually cause you even more difficulties. So if you get benefits that you never applied for, just report it to your state unemployment agency and ask for directions. Don't respond to any calls, any emails, any text messages telling you to wire money, send cash, or put money on gift cards, because your state agency will never tell you to repay money that way. We've also seen an uptick recently in utility scams. And this is where the caller says he's calling from your utility company. You're behind in your bill payments to them, and they're going to turn off your power unless you provide payment. And this kind of scam has taken off because a lot of people actually did fall behind in bills during the pandemic. And if you get a call from someone claiming to be your utility company, what you need to do is just thank the caller for the information and firmly tell them that you're going to contact the utility company directly. You're going to use the number on your bill or on the company's website. Even if the caller insists that you have a past due bill or your services are going to be shut off, never give banking information over the phone unless you're the one who's placing the call to a number that you know is legitimate. And remember, utility companies don't demand banking information, either by email or by phone. And they certainly won't force you to pay by phone as your only option. Now, charity scams are another type of scam that's regularly reported to our office. And we want you to be generous, but we want you to be careful. So when you decide to support a cause that you care about, you want your donation to count. And doing some research and planning your giving can help ensure that your donations get where they're going to do some good. Scammers use names that are often very similar to well-known charities in order to confuse donors. So you should always double check the name of the organization to which you're donating. All legitimate charities must be registered with the New York State Attorney General's Charities Bureau. And you can contact the Charities Bureau. We have a website. It's Charities NYS, that's New York State, charitiesnys.com. And you can investigate the charities online through that website. And there's just one final suggestion I'd like to make on this topic. It's never a good idea to make a donation based on a phone call that you receive. The caller might be a scammer who's trying to get you to donate to a sham charity, or even if the caller is a real telemarketer who's acting on behalf of a legitimate charity, on average, that telemarketer is going to be keeping about 1/3 of the donation that you make. So the best way to make sure that your contribution goes directly to the charity is to go to its website and donate, or send it a check. So be careful about how you're donating. Now, the tech support scam is another common scam. And this is where the caller says he's from Apple or Microsoft or some other tech company. And he's going to say, you have a problem with your computer, and if you give me remote access, I'll fix it for you. Now, if you do give him remote access to your computer, that person is going to put malware or ransomware on it so that you can't use it. And the only way you're going to be able to get him to remove it is to give your credit card information to him over the phone. So most of the phone scams I've been talking about are estimated to work in about 1 in 50 calls. But this tech support scam, this scam works in about 1 in 6 calls. It's a very efficient scam. And it's not entirely clear what emotional button it pushes, but the reality is that we've all become extremely dependent on our computers, especially during the pandemic. Many people aren't comfortable with how they work, and it's that lack of familiarity that scammers are taking advantage of. Now, as people are spending more and more time at home, social distancing, online romance scams have started taking off too, especially among older adults. Scammers often will set up fake profiles on social media and dating sites. And what they'll do is they'll reach out to people, especially people who have recently posted their own profiles, and they'll start engaging in all kind of endearing messages to earn your trust. And they'll start emailing, they'll start talking on the phone, and they will work on building that trust with you until eventually they will ask for money. And there's always going to be a reason or an excuse that they'll give you as to why they can't meet in person. Either they broke their leg, or they've got a business they can't leave, or some excuse like that. But they're going to emphasize they really need the money. And too often the victim does provide money to a scammer like this. And what's really disturbing about the romance scam is that people usually don't report it. So if someone calls our office with suspicions about a caller who may be perpetrating the IRS scam or the Social Security scam, they're relieved when they're told it's a scam. But if someone calls about suspicions over a person who they've developed feelings for and our office tells them it's a scam, they don't want to hear it. Oftentimes, they will keep sending a romance scammer money even after law enforcement officials have told them it's a scam. So if you know someone who's going to dating websites or social media, it's really important to warn them in advance, because they've found that people are less likely to become victims if they know the warning signs. Now, I mentioned in the context of several of scams that scammers will often demand payment in the form of a gift card. Gift cards have become the method of choice because the money ends up being virtually untraceable. Providing the numbers from the back of a gift card, it's just like sending cash. So whether victims give the numbers over the phone or text a photo off the back of the card, they're essentially handing money to scammers. And those scammers are very quickly going to drop the funds into foreign bank accounts. And it's nearly impossible to get the money back because gift cards don't have the same protections as credit cards or debit cards. Now, in response to the increasing number of scams demanding payment by gift cards, the Federal Trade Commission has now made it illegal for any telemarketer to request payment by gift card, either over the phone or otherwise. Gift cards are to be used for gifts and not for payment of obligations. So if someone is asking you to pay over the phone by a gift card, it's a clear red flag that you're being scammed. So what are the phone tips that you can use to stay safe? Well, for starters, we encourage you to think of the phone as a one-way street. And by that, we mean it's only safe to give out personal information about yourself if you're the one that made the call to a number that you know to be a legitimate number of your bank or credit card company or government agency. If someone calls you, you can never be sure that they really are who they say they are. So for example, if the caller says he's from American Express and he's calling about unauthorized charges on your credit card, hang up. Take out your credit card and call the 800 number on the back of it. And now you can be 100% certain that you're talking with a real American Express employee. Now, the guy who initially called you might have been from American Express, or he might have been a scammer. There's no way to be sure. In order to make a call more believable, many scammers are using a technology called caller ID spoofing. And they can make your caller ID say whatever they want it to say. So if they want you, for example, to believe that it's the IRS calling, they can make your caller ID say IRS or Internal Revenue Service, or they can even display the phone number of the IRS in Washington, D.C. So what we encourage you to do is use caller ID as a screening tool. And if you don't recognize the number, just don't answer it. Some people, when they don't recognize the number and they know they're getting a scam call, they like to engage the caller and play along for a while to waste their time. And that's not a great idea for two reasons. First of all, you're wasting your own time too. But more importantly, the computers that generate these calls can tell when a live voice answers. So if a live voice does answer, the program is designed to keep calling your number, and that scammer might also sell your number to another scammer as well. So the point is, the more of these calls that you answer, the more you're going to get. And the fewer that you answer, the fewer you're going to get.
Francisca A. Sabity.
Resist the temptation to do that. Some phone providers are now providing spam warnings where you'll see the words potential spam or something similar on your caller ID. And that's telling you that the number that originated the call is not the same number that's being displayed. And they're warning you that caller ID spoofing is being used. And as more and more of us are not answering the phone if we don't recognize the number, scammers are using a technology called neighbor spoofing. And they spoof a number in your area code in exchange with 4 other digits added.
Yeah, that's happened a lot.
Hoping that you'll think it's a neighbor or a friend and will answer the phone on that basis. Don't fall for it. Just don't answer the phone at all if you don't recognize the entire number. Sometimes they'll actually spoof your own number, which has happened to me, and this can be confusing, but it's impossible to call your own number. Now, there are also call blocking apps out there. I'm going to mention a couple of names, but there are many more. Nomo Robo and Robo Killer, which for a small monthly fee will intercept all your calls. And if then they can identify it as spam, you'll hear just one ring and then it hangs up. Now, I try just not to answer the phone if I don't recognize the number, but these call blocking apps are another option out there. People often ask whether the do not call registry is worth signing up for. And that's at the website donotcall.gov. So I'm signed up for the do not call registry, but I still get a million spam calls. So the answer is yes and no. It's worth signing up for because legitimate American telemarketing companies won't call you if you're on the do not call registry. Unfortunately, though, the spammers who could be calling from anywhere in the world using caller ID spoofing are not deterred by it, because even if you report the number that you saw to the Federal Trade Commission, it's not really the number that originated the call. So it's not a perfect solution. And in addition to the spam calls, we get a lot of complaints about phishing emails. And that's where you get an unsolicited email asking you to click on a link. And do not do this, because they're then going to ask you to confirm that you're the person that they were trying to reach, and you're going to be putting yourself at risk for identity theft. So if you get an email and you're not sure if it's legitimate, or even if it looks legitimate, don't click on anything. What you should do is go to your browser box and log on to the legitimate website of the company, or get the phone number of the company and contact them directly. As more and more older adults are using the internet, one of the dangers is using weak passwords. A lot of us worry about forgetting our passwords. So what we do is we use a family member's name, or our birth dates, or the street we live on, or something else that's familiar. Those are weak passwords because scammers can Google you and they can figure out what your password might be from information that's readily available online. So an ideal password is going to be long and have letters, punctuation, symbols, and numbers. The other vulnerability I just want to mention is your security question. When you open an account online, you're usually asked to set up a security question in case you forgot your password. And then when you answer the security question, you can reset the password and get access to your account. So what scammers are now doing, when they get your username but they don't know your password, is they'll enter some kind of gibberish for the password just to prompt the security question. And when they get the security question, they're hoping it's something searchable about you online. So for example, your city of birth or your mother's maiden name, those are weak security questions because they're answerable online. You want to pick another question like, who was your favorite athlete when you were a child? Or what was the make of your first car? Or something that just can't be easily Googled about you. And the last thing I want to mention, especially as we head into the holiday season, is about online shopping. So please always pay with credit cards. Don't use your debit card. If you pay by credit card and the product doesn't arrive, you can dispute the charges with your credit card company. They're not going to make you pay. Even if you paid, but you can demonstrate that you still didn't receive the product, they're going to pay you back. But when you pay by debit card, the money is immediately removed from your account and it's gone. And if it turns out later that you didn't get what you paid for, you're going to be in a much worse position trying to get a bank to give you your money back, rather than disputing a charge in the first place. So that's it, everybody. I want to thank you very much for your time and your attention. And we have a website that's a wonderful resource. It's called AG.NY.gov, attorneygeneral.NewYork.gov, AG.NY.gov. There's a wealth of information on there. So please, you can also just Google Attorney General New York State and it'll take you to that website. And now, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to talk about it. I can also, if people like, put up the websites I mentioned during the presentation into the chat box. I mentioned identitytheft.gov, annualcreditreport.com, charitiesnys.com, and donotcall.gov. I'll put those all into the chat box.